freedom, pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know, especially on this special holiday. Welcome to another edition of Character Matters. I'm Dr. George Simon. We are going to have a special program today. It's the Memorial Day weekend, and as you may know, this is not just a time for grilling out back and kicking back with family and friends and enjoying some time off. It's also a time to remember that many have paid and sacrificed, paid the ultimate price to preserve the freedoms that we so liberally enjoy here in this great country of ours. And it's a freedom that we all have a duty to protect. And it's a freedom that is increasingly under assault and challenged by what I believe to be the defining issue of our time, the defining internal issue of our time, which is the character crisis that is plaguing our country. Every week, it seems, we have a new example of it. Some person goes a little crazy, and we end up scratching our heads and asking ourselves, what is going on here? And perhaps if you have a chance to join the discussion today, you can chime in with your thoughts on it. I'm going to have some thoughts on the latest example myself this week. Just a few days ago, we heard about, in fact, it was just yesterday, I believe, that a young man opened fire near the University of Santa Barbara campus randomly after stabbing some folks in a nearby apartment. Randomly went shooting again, premeditatedly. He didn't just go berserk. He had an issue to pick. He wanted to pick with the world at large. And he ended up taking out his anger and his upset with 7 innocent people who met their fate at the hands of this crazy person before taking his own life. And I'll have some thoughts on that, as well as thoughts just in general on the character issues that plague our great country and challenge our freedoms. I had a chance to attend a film festival here in Little Rock, Arkansas, weekend before this, in which I saw some documentary films. One documentary film followed some men in their travails over in Afghanistan on multiple deployments, and got a chance to visit with some of the folks who were the subject of the documentary, some of the enlisted men, one of whom was a very articulate young man and who had his problems, to be sure, had many issues. I think he pretty well acknowledged that he had not yet fully grown when he enlisted, as many young men who enlist in the military today have struggled with similar issues. They're still immature, still don't have much direction in life, still not sure what they want to do, and maybe sometimes see the service as a chance to kind of get their act together and find out what it is that they're all about and what they want to do with their lives, and in the meantime serve their country. And this young man was very articulate and gave what I consider to be perhaps the best description of genuine post-traumatic stress disorder that I've ever heard. Now, as a psychologist who was in practice for many years before retiring, I witnessed many individuals who had been given the diagnosis of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, many of whom I felt did not really warrant this diagnosis. Many of whom did not really meet the criteria for the diagnosis, but were given the diagnosis by professionals who believed that just about anybody that's experienced trauma of some type, even mild trauma, must have some degree of post-traumatic stress disorder. So they would diagnose it. On other occasions, individuals would claim to have it and claim all the symptoms of it, or claim many of the symptoms of it, because they had a secondary agenda. Maybe they were seeking benefits that they would not otherwise get unless they carried the diagnosis. And then many times I didn't think the diagnosis was warranted. But this gentleman who served with several folks who actually did have the syndrome gave the best single description of it and gave his own thoughts on the nature of the disease that I think, that in my opinion, rivaled anything that I'd ever heard before at a professional workshop or in any of the trainings that I've had over the years. So he gave me kind of a crash course. He also exemplified for me what it is for a young man to come to terms with himself and to take stock in himself and size himself up in a way that takes an honest look at character, at his character. And I would venture to say that this young man has forged for himself an admirable character from what I could see. He was about the most genuine person that I have met in a long time. And it made me proud, frankly. It made me proud to think that a young man like that had served his country, had protected my freedom, had put his life on the line, and had also, for the sake of his family, for his own sake, and for the sake of his country, decided to take stock in himself and to commit himself to being a better person. And as I see it right now, even if he is not perfect, none of us are, he is an admirable person. He is especially an admirable person for taking that responsibility seriously. And I'm not going to mention any names, but if this gentleman happens to be listening tonight, he knows who he is, and he knows that I am really proud of him and think his country should be proud of him and that he should be proud of himself. And I thank him. And he was a living example to me of what can happen. when an individual decides to take stock of themselves. And I have witnessed this many times. Many professionals believe that disturbances of character, that personality and character disorders are impossible to treat. Well, as I write in my books, In Sheep's Clothing and Character Disturbance, those two books emphasize the point that these conditions, these personality disorders and character disorders, are almost impossible to treat, especially if you go about it using traditional psychotherapeutic methods. Psychotherapy was never designed to meet the problems that we face today. It was primarily designed to help individuals who basically are sound in character, who are struggling with deep unconscious fears and anxieties that they have deeply repressed, and who are basically nervous wrecks because of it. It is not meant, our traditional psychotherapeutic methods are insight-oriented methods. They're not meant to deal with character disturbance. But using appropriate methodology and using the tactful art of confronting and correcting distorted thinking processes and maladaptive behaviors, character disturbance can be treated, and I have witnessed many individuals in my career take stock of themselves and turn their lives around by working on their character development. And my hat is off to them. They owe themselves, and we owe them a debt of gratitude, because this country depends upon people of good character who honor the ideals that our country has always represented and make it possible for us to remain free. It's because individuals like this person who went postal just the other day, it is precisely because we have individuals who cannot or will not control themselves and who pose a threat to everyone else, that we have law after law after law on the books restricting all responsible people's freedoms. This is insanity. Once again, this individual who killed all these people just the other day, once again, his weapon was registered legally and purchased legally. The only laws broken were the killing of these innocent people, and we already have laws against murder on the books. We will not stop this insanity by passing more laws or more gun control. That will not solve it. It will not solve the problem. It's a waste of time and energy. It only makes people feel good who want to do something. But the something we really need to do is we really need to pay attention to this crisis we're in. We need to pay attention to one another and to those among us who are not doing very well character-wise. As I understand it, this young man the other day was upset that women were not finding him a suitably attractive person to want to have sexual relations with. And so he was upset that at 22 years of age, he was still a virgin. Further, he was upset that all the women that he had attempted to date found other men more interesting or more attractive. He called these alpha males that they were more attracted to. He did not see himself as an alpha male, but he thought himself every bit as worthy And he was mad at the world and mad at all women and mad at all alpha males who managed to get the girls, and was going to take out his wrath and prove that he was a force to be contended with. And he bragged about this. He wrote about this. It did not occur to him that there might be some aspects of his personality that needed further refinement, that there were some things about him that perhaps were not attractive. I saw some photos of this gentleman. He was not particularly physically unattractive looking. So perhaps there were aspects of his personality that people did not cotton to. But he saw himself as just fine and everybody else as messed up. And not only that, not only were they messed up, but they had wounded him by not accepting him, and they were going to have to pay. This kind of thinking is precisely the kind of thinking that goes on in the mind of a disturbed character. Precisely. It's never them, it's always everyone else. There's never anything about them that they need to take a look at or to modify or change. It's everybody else that's hurting them, that's causing them a problem. This is just so common. Character disturbance in and itself is just unfortunately so much more common today. And it is hurting us because our society counts on most people being of good character. It was de Tocqueville who supposedly said, apparently he might not have actually said this, but the saying is often attributed to him, that America is great because America is good. And when America ceases being good, it will cease being great. And what he meant by that is a good and noble and proud people of upstanding character, who fulfill their responsibilities, who take certain things seriously. You don't have to look at very many statistics to realize how much has changed so fundamentally in the fabric of our culture. Families no longer stay together. Families, the very building block of society. The very building block of society. Everything, there was that book a while back, Everything I Learned in Life, I learned in kindergarten, or everything I needed to know in life, I learned in kindergarten. Well, it's a nice thought to think that in kindergarten we learn all the lessons that we need to learn, but the real forging ground for all those life lessons was meant to be an intact home with two parents of good character. Parents that didn't cuss one another out, that didn't drink one another under the table and become irresponsible, neglect their children, abuse their children, but modeled for their children values, taught their children discipline, encouraged in their children self-discipline. This is where it all needs to begin. And it's wonderful when our social institutions, such as our kindergartens and our schools, can back all that up. It's wonderful. But that hardly even happens today. As a matter of fact, many schools are in such a position that they get so many children of such deficient character, children who are not prepared in the slightest to learn, and only prepared to cause trouble and to wreak havoc in the school classroom. Many teachers and many schools are basically doing the job of parenting, are playing nanny and nursemaid to students, trying to raise these children just to get them to a point where they're prepared to learn other things. And if the schools have trouble in that process and appeal to the parents for help, many times these days parents take issue with schools for trying to get through to their children and to instill some sense of value and to instill some sense of character. It's a crying shame. And what it places at stake is our precious freedom. So tonight's show is going to be a special show in a couple of ways. And I invite you to join the discussion at 718-717-8296. 717-8296. 718-717-8296. I'd like to hear from you if you have some thoughts about what's happened with us culturally. What do you see as the nature of our cultural decline? What's behind it all? You know that I have opinions about that, and I'll talk about them every week. But as I said, this is going to be a special program because in tonight's program, we're going to treasure the values that unfortunately gave rise to this holiday. A holiday where we remember how many millions of folks have paid the ultimate price to defend our freedoms. It doesn't take long. Just looking at so many places around the world where these kinds of freedoms are not enjoyed, where people live in near slavery, or where the government controls so much of everyday life, stifles individual liberty and initiative especially. In every single place where that kind of rule, where that totalitarian rule has been tried, eventually people laboring under the oppressive weight of such cultures, eventually these things collapse under their own weight. People have an innate desire to be free. But in order to remain free, people have to be responsible. Freedom and responsibility go hand in hand. And to be responsible, people have to develop character from an early age. And I so treasure the freedoms that we have. And I so treasure the ideals upon which this country was founded. And I so value the freedoms that we enjoy. That when I was first contemplating and writing a book on the interrelationship between freedom and character, the utter independence of these two, interdependence of freedom and character, the fact that you cannot avoid oppressive governmental regulations when people behave rampantly irresponsibly, when people do not have the character to behave responsibly, and they abuse one another, they cheat one another, they scam one another. This inevitably invites governing authorities to try and stem the tide, to try and solve a problem by enacting rules, regulations, laws, all of which restrict freedom. And when people are of good character and don't need anybody basically telling them what to do because they're guided by an internal compass or by their faith or by some other guidepost that tells them how to behave appropriately and responsibly, and they do so, and they are left alone they will naturally tend not only to prosper themselves, but to innovate and create opportunities for everyone. And this is the dream of America. This was how this place came into being. The zealots that came here already had their principles in place. Some of them were fanatics, Puritans, we call them. Some of them were just absolute fanatics, very devoted to a way of life that took responsibilities very seriously, that honored certain core values. And all they were looking for was a place to breathe free, and to take care of themselves and to take care of one another. That's how we were born. That's how we sustain ourselves. And that's how we become great. So when I was working on this book about the interdependence of freedom and character, I was haunted by this melody that you hear at the beginning of our show. This melody came to me, just a melody. And it played in my head over and over and over again for many years before I decided to do anything about it. But because it would not go away, I became convinced that it was inspired by something or someone, by some power greater than myself, and I decided finally to honor it because I literally was haunted by it. And at the time I was haunted by it, I had only a thought in my mind about 3 words for a part of the melody, and that was America, my home. Up until that point, frankly, up until writing this book about the interdependence of freedom and character, I had not been much of a patriotic zealot at all. As a matter of fact, my patriotism was probably as dormant as anybody's has ever been. And so, for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why I was having this spirit kind of rekindled, but I was. And so I became obsessed, literally, with finding all the words that I needed to this melody. And because I am not an arranger, I'm a very primitive composer. And because the only instrument I play very well, or had played fairly well until I almost lost it, was my voice, because I do sing some, I could only hum this tune or sing it. Nonetheless, I went to the piano and I banged out the basics of the melody and the chords, and I began setting about to find an arranger who could arrange what would become America, My Home. And after years of trial and error, I came across an individual who was touched by the melody. I did a preliminary arrangement for it, and then I realized its full potential. I eventually got a second arranger because what I had in my head was not quite what the first arranger had done, and so eventually I had the piece that you hear at the beginning and at the end of the show. Well, once I had it, I had no idea what I was going to do with it. But some of you have heard this story before, but on a lark, at one of our riverfront festivals here in Little Rock, on a Memorial Day, in 2001, I took this song on a CD, the demo of it. I took it and and handed it to the organizers of our Riverfront Festival and asked if they wouldn't listen to it and consider it for a performance at the Riverfest. Well, they did, and later that year, when the tragedy struck on September 11th, a regional television station remembered this performance, which was very well received by everyone who heard it. And they paired the song with a video montage and played it after every newscast following the coverage of the 9/11 tragedy. And from there, the song went on to get some national notoriety, and now is a popular performance piece at patriotic venues across the country when folks hear it. And I'm urging folks on this patriotic holiday to go to YouTube and to hear for yourself on one of the links, America, My Home. Play it for your friends. Play it for folks that you think might enjoy it, not just to hear it and to celebrate the freedoms that we enjoy, but also who might be interested in performing the song. Tracks are available for the song for karaoke-style performances, including an orchestral track with backing vocals, and you can get that from me. You can find out how to get that by visiting either my website, www.drgeorgesimon.com, that's www.drgeorgesimon.com, or my blog, www.manipulative-people.com. Or you can visit the America My Home Facebook page and get information there on how to get performance rights and to secure the tracks to perform this song. And so, because today is a special day, because it's a special holiday this weekend, and because you only get to hear the first part of the song and a portion of the end of the song at the end of the show, I'm going to play for you in just a moment the entire piece, America, My Home. And then at the close of the show, I'm going to play it again just before the exit bumper. So for all of you standing by out there who have not heard the entire piece, I'm going to play for you now the patriotic piece I composed in 1999, formal title of which is Anthem for the Millennium. It was written as a new patriotic anthem for the new millennium, and it's more popularly known by its subtitle, America, My Home.
I have seen the torch of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dreams some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. from the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So if we appreciation for the blessings we have known, I will honor her forever. America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my
Well, now you've had a chance to hear the entire piece. I've always wanted to play that because it's hard to appreciate the impact that the song has on folks when they hear it many times, because most of that impact comes toward the end of the song. It packs quite a punch as it ramps up, and you don't get a chance to hear that part of it when it plays at the beginning of the program and even at the end. So I wanted to have a chance to let everybody hear the entire piece, including the powerful ending of the song on this Memorial Day weekend. And I also felt it was appropriate, given the special nature of this holiday, and given the fact that we have examples each and every week, unfortunately, in our country, of persons who have lost control and have done horrible things, taken the lives of innocent people because they lack the controls necessary. They lack the internal controls, the self-control, the discipline, the strength of character, the integrity of character, to function responsibly, and to take a serious look at themselves and to seek help, as opposed to blaming everyone else and blaming the world when things aren't going their way. We have example after example. We don't have to look too hard. This happens week after week after week. And as a matter of fact, it's only the egregious examples that come to our attention. This happens every day in our country, every single day in our country. An innocent life is being taken at the hands of someone who is under-socialized, who has not developed the integrity of character to be able to function responsibly in our society. Every single day, lives are lost. Hundreds of lives are lost every day in our country because of irresponsibility, not because of severe mental illness or brain disease, not because basically good people are stressed to the breaking point or are suffering from diseases of the brain that they cannot help. No. Every single day, people are literally dying And people are being, in many cases, abused in one way or another, physically abused, sexually abused, raped, or otherwise mistreated at the hands of individuals who do not have the integrity of character to function responsibly in our society. This is the defining phenomenon of our age. And despite the availability of help that we have out there are so many helping disciplines out there you can barely count them, even professionally. When I was first considering going to school to become a mental health professional, not when I eventually did, but when I was first considering it, back when I was just entering college for the first time in the mid-60s, there were only a couple of professional disciplines that dealt with mental health: psychiatry, clinical psychology. These days, there are so many professional disciplines, all of which deal with mental health issues of one type or another. It's not funny. You can hardly count them. There are marriage and family therapists. There are licensed professional counselors. There are social workers of all different degrees and backgrounds. There are nurse practitioners. There are licensed psychiatric professionals, professional nurses. There are master's level mental health professionals of varying persuasions. You don't even have to be at the doctoral level anymore. There are certified substance abuse counselors, certified alcohol and drug counselors. You name it. There are all these disciplines just in those helping professions. Plus, there are other organizations and resources for people to get assistance. Yet, we are largely ill-equipped to deal with the character crisis that confronts us. We are largely ill-equipped. There are very few therapists in any of the disciplines trained with the kinds of techniques, trained in the kinds of techniques that it takes to successfully deal with disturbances of character and personality, let alone disorders of personality and character. So it is a really significant problem that we have. We're only beginning to get a grip on it, and it's my mission to see that we do a better job of it, and that we do a better job as a society of confronting the problem, to own the problem, first of all, to recognize how serious it is, and then to take a very serious look at the things in our culture that are fostering this problem. There are aspects of our culture that are making this the problem that it is, and we need to take a serious look at that. We need to take a serious look at the institutions and traditions and other aspects of our culture that have eroded in recent years, that have made the explosion of this character problem occur. I've said this many times before, and I make a great point of this in both my books, Character Disturbance and In Sheep's Clothing. In Sigmund Freud's time, there was a certain cultural atmosphere, and it was very repressive. They did not enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy. And not only was the culture repressive socially, it was especially sexually repressive. So people were literally nervous wrecks. They had to be so prim and proper on the outside, and they didn't dare show their feelings, or they didn't dare behave in the kinds of ways that we think are just normal now. Matter of fact, even language was strictly controlled. You certainly didn't utter certain words in the presence of a female. If you were a man, you didn't. If you were a male, you didn't utter certain words at all. You wouldn't even think of it in the presence of a female. And a female would not utter those words at all, ever. It was unheard of. Well, the result of that is a very hung up and repressed society, and a lot of kind of nervous and on edge folks who wouldn't even think to kind of cut loose and let loose and kind of let the devil out a little bit. Well, we have gone 180 degrees the opposite way in our culture today. Well, it's actually happened. The slippery slope has occurred over the last several decades. It began in earnest in the 60s. And it began there in the 60s primarily because, just as occurs within any dysfunctional family, I'm sure many of you listening have heard the term dysfunctional family. Dysfunctional dynamics work like this. In a dysfunctional family, the dynamics are that the people who are supposed to be in charge, the adults in the home, have abandoned all responsibility. Either they're abusing alcohol and drugs, or they're physically or sexually abusive, or they're neglectful, or whatever. But for one reason or another, they don't do their job, so the inmates take over the asylum. That's what happens in the dysfunctional family. And when the inmates take over, as you know, they tend to want to rewrite the rules. So all the rules that would be there, if the adults were behaving responsibly and in principle sent the right kind of rules, those rules all go by the wayside, and the inmates set the rules, and all hell literally breaks loose, and that's the nature of a dysfunctional family. Well, in the mid-60s, we became a dysfunctional family as a country because the adults, the ones setting the rules, they were behaving quite irresponsibly. They lied to get us into a war, and they were sending our young men over to this war under false pretenses, and they were coming back in droves on slabs and in body bags. The inmates revolted. And in their revolt, they kind of took issue with just about everything. And they rewrote all the rules, including the sexual mores. It was a very turbulent time. I don't know how many of you can remember it. Many of you probably are not old enough to remember it. But a revolution of sorts began, and over the ensuing decades, the revolution continued, and we are at a point today. I was making the point earlier that in the Victorian times, when Sigmund Freud was around and all these people were neurotic wrecks, people certainly wouldn't even utter certain words. Well, today, even the F-bomb is not out of bounds, and it's dropped liberally by everyone, including young people, including young women. In Freud's day, it was unheard of for a woman to be heard uttering even milder words. Today, there's virtually nothing left. There's no reservation left. There are very few hang-ups, and in a way, that's good. We are not as neurotic as we once were. We're not as hung up. We're not as unreasonably uptight, as we used to say back in the 60s, about things that really don't matter all that much. But in the process, we have also become undisciplined, unrefined, crude, self-centered, entitled, prone to doing as we please, when we please, without due consideration of the potential impact. And we're doing that pretty much en masse. It's become a huge problem. Our character as a country is suffering because the character of our individuals has declined. There are those individuals still left who take it all very seriously, have firm principles upon which they live. They honor those principles every day. They go to work every day. They pay their dues. They pay their responsibilities. They work dutifully, diligently at their jobs. They take care of their families. They take that responsibility seriously. They stick together. They work through issues. If they're marital partners, they're faithful to one another. They make it work. They accept the good times with the bad. They hold their families together. We still have those individuals among us, but the burden on these people of good character, the burden on these folks increases monumentally every day. They are already carrying so much on their backs, but the burden grows daily. Whereas the burden on those who are not doing their fair share and who are not honoring the principles that they need to honor to function independently and responsibly, the burden on them is becoming less every day. Because guess who's willing to pick up the slack? Or guess who is forced to pick up the burden for those who won't? The responsible folks are. They're forced to take up the burden. Legislatively, they're forced to take up the burden. Now we have irresponsibility on all sides. We have fat cats who have profited immensely from our wonderful system, but whose greed in character knows no bounds, and who instead of sharing opportunity, sharing wealth, and sharing a sense of obligation to help us all do well, carve out enough for themselves and then let everybody else be damned. So we have that, and then we also have folks on the other end who don't want to do the work that it takes. It takes an incredible amount of work to function in this free society responsibly and to sustain yourself. You have to work very hard. And generally speaking, most responsible Americans work very hard. Most families who are living the so-called ideal American lifestyle are working 2 jobs, very hard, with very little time off. And those entrepreneurial folks out there among us who are developing the jobs, for the most part, there are a few exceptions, like within the high-tech industry and like that, but there are a few exceptions. Most folks are grinding it out 24/7, 7 days a week, trying to make a go of things and trying to build something and to create opportunities for others. It's a very tough responsibility. And for all those who take that responsibility seriously and who honor the principles on which our country was founded and who take the matter of personal character development seriously, my hat is off to you. And my hat is especially off to those, and my deepest appreciation goes out to those who have put their life on the line to preserve the freedom that we have in this country. My grandparents were immigrants to this country. They came from a horribly oppressive situation where They risked death just as many people do now, just on the basis of their faith. They risked death. They had a choice. They could abandon their faith. They could abandon their faith and their principles and be saved, or they could convert and be spared. Now, my grandmother, she wasn't of age, of consent to convert. So she had to watch as her entire family was slaughtered because they would not abandon their faith. And my grandparents literally kissed the ground that they walked on many times in this country. They literally did. It was a gesture. And on holidays, I witnessed them do this. They treasured this land, this place where they could breathe free. But they were also very decent people, and they asked for nothing. They could barely speak the language when they got here. They asked for not a thing except the chance to breathe free and to raise their family in the absence of fear. And raise their families they did, large families. Raise them they did, and work they did. Hard work, every day, menial work, working themselves up, working themselves to the point of providing opportunities for their children, who then provided even greater opportunities for their children. They knew instantaneously what America was all about, and they appreciated it like nothing else. And I can't help but think of them on a day like today, or on any American holiday where we celebrate our freedoms and we celebrate the price that it takes. This country was built on certain principles and ideals and depends on people of character who honor those ideals. Without that, without people of character who honor our ideals, freedom cannot survive. The freedom that we depend on, the freedom that makes it possible for us to innovate, to exercise our faith without fear, to be all that we can be, to be who we want to be, not what some entity tells us we have to be. To be free to prosper to the best of our ability, not just to make as much money as we can, but to generate as much wealth in other ways as we can, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. All of that is made possible because of the freedoms that we enjoy. From the relatively unintrusive role of government still, even though it has grown exponentially in recent years, terrifyingly exponentially. And why? Because government is faced with this character problem, and because it sees the need to regulate as a possible solution to it. Because it doesn't see any other way. There is another way. So as we close tonight, and you hear again the song that I played for you earlier, and you can hear it in its entirety on YouTube, think about it. Contemplate the freedoms we enjoy and what price has been paid to sustain it by so many over the years. Think about it so seriously, and think about filling